Okay, good afternoon to you all. Today's lectures is going to be a continuation of the HRD process. More specifically, today we'll be looking at the second component of human resource development. If you can remember, last week we looked at the first phase, which is training needs analysis or needs assessment. And so by the end of this lecture, we should be able to understand how we can make good use of the information that is attained from the needs assessment. So we are going to use that outcome to design the training or HRD intervention. And all right. So once the needs assessment has been done or is completed, the HRD professional faces a number of important questions or dilemma, some of which are the ones I'm going to take you through. So for instance, they are found between a position where they have to verify whether the issue that they identified through the training needs analysis can be addressed by a training or an HRD intervention. In other words, if the outcome of the needs assessment is such that it is because of management inefficiency, that is why we are encountering those deficiencies or problems, then training cannot resolve that on behalf of employees. So for instance, if it happens that the requisite tools or machinery that employees can use to deliver on their job is not provided by management, then it will be useless to go ahead with a training program. So that is what this first point is trying to address. Now, secondly, assuming the issue can be resolved by training, the next question that you have to think about is, how do you translate the results of the needs assessments into a specific training intervention? Because the outcome of the needs assessment is basically an information or data. But how do you make good use of this data to design a training program? And that is primarily what we're doing today. And if training is necessary, how do we handle the make or buy decision? So basically, we are trying to verify whether in an attempt to design a training program, we can do it in-house. That is, by relying on the expertise that we find in the organization, or we will have to consult an outside enterprise, more or less like outsourcing the training program to another organization that is well versed with expertise in that area. Now, after resolving that question, there's also the need for us to verify or ascertain who will be an effective trainer. So assuming we decide to build it in-house, do we have the experts that can actually embark on the training program by delivering it to the target audience? Or if we decide to outsource it to an outside enterprise, are we going to only help them design the program whilst it is facilitated by an in-house person, or they will have to come with their own trainer who will be facilitating it? Beyond this, we also need to verify the best way to organize the program or intervention. And these best ways could be either doing it within the organization as in on-the-job training, or doing it outside as in off-the-job training. And in all these alternatives, it comes with its own repercussions. Again, how should the training methods and materials be selected? Over here, training methods, we are referring to the extent to which maybe we'll be using an online means of delivering the training program as a result of COVID-19, if we do not want people to come into close contact with each other within the learning centers. or if it is going to be a pre-recorded video explanations, that will be disseminated together with other prepared training manuals to the trainees and so on and so forth. So all those things have to be trashed out over here. And what is the most effective use of technology for the training? So this is where I was talking about augmenting the training materials, such in the pamphlets or the books that will be prepared for trainees to read with some form of technology, perhaps recording the session and also giving it to them, or setting up an online simulatory interface for people to also make good use of, and so on and so forth. And lastly, are there particular scheduling issues that should be considered in preparing for the training? And this is particularly important because employees ordinarily will be very much busy with their day-to-day work proceedings. And so whoever is designing the training intervention must have at the back of their mind that they have to take into consideration the normal working schedules of the trainees, and also, if possible, write to the appropriate quarters for them to be skilled, so that once they come for the training program, their mind and spirit and everything will be over there. Again, the scheduling should also be made in such a way that it does not interfere with the work-life balance issues of the trainees, especially if you are scheduling it during weekends. Then it has to be properly arranged so that at least they can also spend quality time with their non-working colleagues. So the purpose of this lecture is to discuss the second phase of the human resource development process, as I mentioned earlier on. And basically, we are referring to the designing of the training and HRD intervention. So that is basically the purpose of today's class. And at this point, an organization following effective HRD practices would have completed phase one of the training and HRD process, which is the needs assessment or the training needs analysis. And they will be very much so they will be very much informed with the data or information which projects what's happened during the needs assessment phase. So some of these data will usually provide information on where the training or HRD program is needed. What we are saying over here is that after completing the needs assessment, we should be able to identify where in the organization or which people in the organization have some deficiencies and will require training or HRD intervention to resolve it. The second one that needs assessment will also assist us with is what kind of training or HRD program is needed. And over here, there are so many training programs that you can run for your workforce in an organization. And so the training needs assessment will narrow it down to the one which is currently relevant and needs attention. So if it is about customer relations training program, then you do it. If it's about a training program on how to use a newly procured software or information system, then it means that is what the training should be about, and so on and so forth. And who needs to be trained? Which caliber of workforce in your organization needs this training? Is it those who joined recently, or those who have been there for quite a longer period of time, or those who will actually be using this new software that we have procured? So all this information will be resolved by the needs assessment. And lastly, the conditions under which training should occur. And these conditions are pretty much important because by the end of the training, we expect that the trainees should be able to transfer whatever they learned under the intervention onto their job. And so if the nature of the deficiency is such that it will require them to be trained on the job, then such conditions should be such conditions should be taken into consideration when you are designing the training program, which means that you have to design it in a way where they can be working and also attending to the training program simultaneously. In other words, it could be scheduled in such a way that the facilitator will come around while they are working, then the facilitator will also be taking them through the expertise. In addition to the needs identified, will have to be prioritized. So basically, in addition, the needs identified will have to be prioritized so that senior management and the HRD staff know which programs or issues require attention. Good. So we are saying that in as much as the training needs analysis can ascertain numerous information which needs attention, there is the need for management and the HRD staff to prioritize, because you might not be in a position to treat or tackle all these deficiencies at one point in time. So looking at the pressing ones and how they can quickly change the fortunes of the organization, there will be the need for them to put them more or less on a scale of preference to actually resolve it. Now, as mentioned previously, it may also be the case that the needs assessment reveals that some non-training interventions is needed. What are some of these non-training interventions? It could be that the organization needs to embark on changes in their organizational structure. Maybe they will need to introduce some form of incentives and benefit programs. Maybe they might have to embark on rigorous staffing. They might also need to provide right tools for the employees to make use of, and some other management systems. So if these are the outcomes of the needs assessment, or the challenges which we can attribute to contributing to the deficiency of the employees as a result of these factors that I've mentioned, then it means training cannot resolve it. For instance, if the reason for employee non-performance is inadequate tools, or they're not having the right tools, then no matter how you train them, they will still require you to provide the tools. In that regard, we can say that training will not be the right solution to the problem that you have identified. This indicates that training is not a panacea to fix managerial issues, such as poor motivation, inadequate working tools, unclear expectations, lack of recognition, rewards, and so on and so forth. Now, so armed with these needs assessment data, the focus now turns to designing an effective HRD intervention program. The key to designing these activities are as follows. The first one will be to set the objectives of the HRD intervention, and which will be the main goal you want to achieve by the end of administering the HRD intervention. The second one will also be to select the trainer or the vendor, and that is where the decision between either making or buying the intervention comes in, and you will have to resolve it over there, depending on some considerable factors we'll be looking at shortly. Then the third activity will be to develop a lesson plan in order to guide the intervention or the training process. And the fourth one will be selecting program methods and techniques which can be used to deliver the program. And these include the appropriate use of technology. Then the fifth one will be to be putting all this together to develop the materials. So usually some of these materials could be the pamphlets or the audio or video that will be recorded for the trainees to make good use of. Depending on the nature of the program too, then there might be the need for some technology or self-paced inputs that trainees can use to mimic their experiences on the job. Then the fourth is where you schedule the program so that it does not interfere with the day-to-day work activities and the weekends of your trainees. So primarily, we have completed needs assessments, which we did last week. And today we are over here. Shortly, we'll be looking at these steps. And then next week, we'll look at the implementation. And finally, we will look at the evaluation of the training or HRD intervention. So we are now going to look at how you can define the objectives. So defining the objectives of the HRD intervention. When we talk about defining the objectives for the HRD intervention, it is construed as one of the first things that the HRD expert or professional must do. That is immediately after they complete the needs assessments. And don't forget, the needs assessment data are useful for defining the program's objectives because they identify the deficiencies and challenges to be addressed. This indicates that if the needs assessment was hurriedly done, and for that matter, it did not capture adequate information, then it means that when it comes to the definition of the objectives for the HRD intervention, we will find ourselves wanting, which means that to do a very good job in defining the objectives, we must have done a proper training needs assessment. Now, according to Robert Major, objectives of the HRD intervention can be construed as the description of a performance that the HRD professional wants learners to be able to exhibit before he or she can consider them as competent. So basically, what are the manifestations in terms of cognition, affect, and behavior that we expect the trainees to exhibit so that we can comfortably say that they have learned something? And that is what we are talking about. And that is how Robert Major defines the objectives. For that reason, the training or HRD program objectives describes the intent and the desired results of the HRD program, which means that it basically tries to elucidate what we expect to see by the end of the program. So I think it is pretty much straightforward. The results can be achieved in many ways, in ways such as through lectures, role play, and coaching. But this is not specified in the objective. So usually when you are writing your objectives for the HRD intervention, you don't put in there that you are going to achieve it through maybe online lectures or through a pre-recorded video or through case studies or role plays. But we can use some of these methodologies such as lectures, role plays, and coaching to impart some knowledge in the minds of the trainees for them to exhibit or achieve our objective. Now, objectives are also considered to be very much essential to the success of training or an HRD program. And this is so because in addition to forming the basis for the selection of the program content and methods, objectives are also used by organizations to evaluate the program's success. And we'll be looking at this when we get to the last stage, which is the evaluation of training or HRD intervention. Because think about it this way, we've pumped in a lot of money to conduct needs assessment, and the needs assessment is pointing us to certain issues as being the deficiency and the reason why we are non-performing as an organization. Now, so when we set forth to achieve, we set forth to correct these deficiencies, by the end of running the program, the results, which is much resounding and astute to demonstrate that we've been successful in our attempt, will be the evaluation of the objective, which means that the objective must be properly stated so that at the end of the program, it can be evaluated accordingly. So in short, objectives tell where the program is going and how you know that you have arrived or reached your desired target. Now, major also continues that useful objectives usually have three critical aspects or qualities. And what are these critical qualities? One, they include the performance of the trainers, the performance that the trainers are expected to exhibit, the conditions under which they must exhibit these performance attributes, and the criteria that will be used in judging the success or failure of this performance. Okay. So some examples of program objectives are as presented here. The first one, it is trying to say that by the end of the program, the trainees should be able to use the information found on a completed loan application, identify whether a client meets the bank's criteria for an acceptable auto loan. So basically, they are saying that by the time they complete the training program, the trainees should be in a position to evaluate a loan applicant to ascertain whether they should be considered for the loan that they have applied for. And the second example of an objective is that after completion of the training, the trainee will accurately identify and describe all the major points in the organization's anti-discriminatory policy. So this presupposes that the organization is pervasively experiencing a lot of discrimination. And for that matter, they are now reorienting or indoctrinating its workforce to be alert on some of these bad habits. And so the training program, having taken the trainees through it, is expected to achieve this desired purpose. Now, program objectives that lack clear statement concerning performance, conditions, and criteria. So these are the three qualities that major identify: the performance, conditions, and criteria, are often ambiguous and can cause those who interpret the objectives differently to feel frustrated and come into conflict with one another. So basically what we are saying here is that if you do not set the objectives to possess these qualities in terms of the performance, the desired performance you are looking for, the condition that under which this performance should be exhibited, and the criteria that we can use to ascertain this desired performance, then when people are put in a position to evaluate trainees on the basis of the objective, they will find themselves in higher difficulty. So 2 ways to ensure that objectives are clear is to choose your words carefully and have the objectives reviewed by others. And it could be given to managers, potential participants, or even colleagues who also possess a lot of knowledge and expertise in the specific program you intend to write, so that by giving you feedback, it will be an opportunity to experience what others think about it, and you have room to make all the necessary corrections and adjustments before you go ahead to implement the training program. So this is also another guideline that have been recommended by major to help would-be HRD professionals or interventionists to develop a useful objective for their program. So you can take a look at it later on. Now, the next issue that HRD professionals must also try to resolve, or the next question that they have to resolve, has to do with whether they have to make the training program from scratch by relying on the expertise they have in-house or within the organization, or the issue of buying the training program from an agent outside the organization. So more or less like outsourcing the training to another house. Now, after a manager or an HRD professional has identified the program objectives, so basically now find themselves in the position where they have crafted an objective which tries to address the deficiencies of the deficiencies identified by the training needs assessments. A series of decisions must be made regarding the development and delivery of the program. One of those decisions is whether to design the program internally or purchase it or portions of it from an outsider vendor, or to use a combination of the two, whether to develop some part and get an expert to come and deliver it, and so on and so forth. Now, to resolve this dilemma or to find solution to these questions, a number of factors needs to be considered. And an example which can elucidate how you will make use of these factors is as given below. So supposing a small manufacturing firm desires to computerize its billing operations. We are talking about a small firm with an intention of computerizing its billing operations. Given the nature of the training needed, it is likely that the firm's management would contract with an outside vendor. So they will outsource it to an outside vendor to provide those services because, one, the firm would probably not have the expertise to design the program in-house. And it is true because we are talking about a small manufacturing firm whose prime objective is to manufacture goods and services to the desired customers. And so they might not even have an HRD office in the first place. If they have an HR office, their core responsibility will be running some support services for the main line authorities and so on and so forth. Now, the second factor or reason could be that management would not likely have the time to design the program. Assuming that HR department, even there is an HR department in the organization, they might be very much consumed by the numerous functions that they have to perform as HRD professionals. And so they might not be in a position to be designing the billing or operations. Sorry, they might not be in a position to assist in computerizing the billing operations. In the same vein, if they have an IT department, which can work hand in hand with the HR department so that whilst they design and develop it, the HR department will assist them to also do the deliver the training. Time will not also be on their side because they might be consumed by a lot of other responsibilities. So in that circumstance, it becomes necessary that they outsource it whilst they use their time to concentrate on other important avenues. And the third reason is that it is not likely that the firm has an HRD department or a full-time HRD professionals, like I mentioned earlier. So if you find yourself in an establishment and these are some of the challenges or constraints that you are facing, then the chances that you will outsource it to an outside firm is high. All right. So in addition to the three factors that I raised, this money also identifies seven main factors or reasons that may force an organization to either outsource the designing and delivery to an outsider or develop it in-house. So in terms of expertise, like I mentioned earlier, when an organization lacks special knowledge, skills, and abilities needed to design and implement the HRD program, then the chances that they will outsource it is high. But if they have the requisite competencies and KSOs, then definitely they will design and implement it in-house. Timeliness. When it is timelier to hire an outsider agency to facilitate the process, then definitely an organization will go for it, because don't forget, they do not have all the time in the world to only design and implement the program. They must still intersperse it with their normal daily routines or responsibilities. So if they find themselves in a tight corner, then it becomes necessary that they outsource it. The number of trainees. Generally, the larger the number of trainees, the greater the likelihood that an organization will be willing to design the program by itself. This is because when it comes to footing the bill for all these trainees, they might find it more costly. And so on the basis of the numbers, they might want to design it in-house so that they will save costs. Now, for just few trainees, the HRD department will likely send them to an outside training agency, because it wouldn't be much costly to do that if the people involved are not so many. So those are some of the dilemma and options that the organization might weigh in order to decide whether they buy or they make it. Subject matter. If the subject matter is sensitive or proprietary, and the HRD department conducts the program in-house using employees as trainees, in the sense that if they do not want the issue they are training employees on to go out so that people use it to tarnish their image or destroy their hard-earned reputation or brand, then they will prefer to do it in-house so that every outcome stays within. In terms of the cost, the HRD department always considers cost, but only in concert with other factors, so that if, for instance, training people outside is much expensive, but they do not have any subject matter experts to handle it, then they will be forced to bear the cost. So this is why I mean by they consider the cost, but only in concert with other factors. So in as much as it might be expensive, they sometimes also have to take the decision of making or buying based on the way other factors also influences. The size of the HRD department. The size of an HRD department is important for assessing the capacity to design, conduct, and implement the HRD intervention. So that if you have a very larger size, then it presupposes that you might have a lot of people with the requisite competency and know-how working for you and who can also deliver the HRD intervention, as opposed to in situations where you have a much smaller or non-existent HRD intervention, then you will be forced to use an outside agency. And the X factor. So the X factor here simply means that beside the first 6 factors I've talked about over here, there might be other factors which are peculiar to your organization, but which have not been captured over here. So those are what we call the extraneous variables or the extraneous conditions which have not been captured here. So the moment those conditions also manifest themselves, then they will be weighed to ascertain whether we have to make the program in-house or we have to buy it from an outside agency. Now, so after deciding whether you want to make it or you want to buy it, there's also the need for you to select the trainer. So who is supposed to facilitate the training program and disseminate knowledge onto the trainees. Once an organization has made a decision to design its own training program or has purchased a program that it will run, a trainer must be selected, provided the instructional format includes one. Now, we are saying provided the instructional format includes one in the sense that sometimes if you purchase a program, it comes with instructional manuals and videos, which you can go through to educate yourself. So there will be no need for you to have someone to come and train you face to face. You can just be reading it or learning or watching the video by yourself and you'll be okay. In other circumstances too, after purchasing, you will need the outsourcing agent or the one who sold it to you to come and actually train you on how you can use the software. So those are the dilemmas that we are talking about over here. This means that selecting a trainer can be fairly easy when an organization has large, multifaceted training staff with the competencies and subject matter expertise to train in high demands. So these are basically some definitional issues of training competencies and subject matter expertise. A distinction can be drawn between them. When we talk about training competency, or the idea that an individual possesses training competencies, it means that such an individual is very much knowledgeable and possesses varied skills which are needed to design and implement a training program. So typically, an HRD professional or an HR manager who has a lot of background in training and development will have all the know-how when it comes to designing and implementing a training program. But they might also be limited in terms of the details or in terms of how a specific program is supposed to run. That is where the subject matter expertise comes in. So for instance, an HR can design a training workshop for his or her workforce on the use of a new software. But the subject matter of the software will have to come from an IT professional. So which means that whereas the HR manager does the designing and assist in the implementation, the trainer must be someone who has an IT background so that they can actually be professing groundbreaking knowledge in the field of IT. So subject matter expertise, in contrast to the training competency, refers to the mastery of the subject matter. So for example, IT professionals are often known or they are often asked to train others on the use of new technology. Now, the point I'm trying to drive here over here is that you could possess the subject matter expertise, but you might lack the knowledge on how you can design and implement it. In the same vein, another person might possess the KSAs on how to design and implement the training program, but they might not be very much knowledgeable on the IT knowledge. They might not be very much knowledgeable when it comes to IT procedures, and so they will need someone else to take that mantle. So subject matter expertise alone does not guarantee an individual will be an effective trainer, which means that just being an IT professional does not guarantee that you'll be very good in terms of training people to use IT knowledge. And we are also saying that the mere fact that you are doing informatics or you are doing engineering does not mean that straight away you can be a good teacher when it comes to engineering. Okay. So many experts make poor trainers. Ideally, a subject matter expert should have the ability to train. Individuals who lack the ability to design and implement effective training programs may rely too heavily on single method of instructions. Okay, so that is why we are saying that you could be an IT professional, but when it comes to how to train others to assimilate the IT knowledge, you might find yourself wanting because you have not been adequately positioned to understand the nitty-gritties of designing and implementing a training program. Okay. And they might end up using merely a lecture format to train employees in CPR. And you know CPR, the one we offer to people that find themselves in distress and perhaps in shock when they faint, and other first aid techniques. They may lack the interpersonal skills to effectively interact with or motivate participants, and so on and so forth. So alternatively, trainers who lack subject matter expertise may also rely too heavily on textbook or other training materials and not be able to explain important concepts or how they are applied to the job. And this is particularly true because you shouldn't expect an HR to be all-knowing when it comes to, for instance, the procurement and implementation and usage of an IT information. Okay, so it becomes imperative that we make sure that whoever is coming to administer the training program is a subject matter expert and also someone who has the training competence. So in addition to contracting an outside vendor, less qualified trainers can be aided. If you find yourself in that dilemma, you can contract an outside vendor by aiding the procedure through these steps. One, teaming skilled trainers with in-house subject matter expertise so that maybe you will be the skilled trainers will be working hand in hand with IT department, and together they will deliver a good instructional program. Using a training technique that does not require human training, such as computer-aided or online instructional programs. And we'll be looking at some of these things during the next lecture in terms of the vestibular training and simulation training programs. Then you can also adopt what we call train the trainer programs, which involves identifying in-house content experts who lack training skills and training them to become effective trainers. So what we are saying is that if you identify experts, for instance, in the IT department of the organization, but who lack knowledge on how they can actually design and implement a training program, then you train them in that regard so that they can also employ that knowledge to disseminate their IT expertise to the intended users. Now, after identifying the trainer or who is supposed to lead the training program, there's also the need for the preparation of a lesson plan so that at any point in time, we will know what is expected to be covered, and we will not be doing things which are tangential or redundant to the training intervention. So the program objectives are necessary for pinpointing desired outcomes of a training or HRD program, but these statements alone are insufficient for determining the content of the training program, the training methods, techniques, and materials. So what we are saying here is that although the training objectives is able to give us the performance, the conditions of practice, and the basis on which we can say the performance of the training program has been successful, it does not give us into great details the contents and even the methods that we must employ when we want to finally administer the training program. So it becomes imperative that we rely on the objective to prepare what we call the lesson plan. Okay, so to translate the program objectives into an executable training session, the development of a lesson plan is necessary. So a lesson plan primarily is a trainer's guide for the actual delivery of the training content. And this is quite straightforward. By creating the lesson plan, it is required that the trainer must determine in advance what is to be covered and how much time is devoted to each part of the session. And typical example usually covers these thematic areas which I have identified over here. So usually the lesson plan stipulates the contents that needs to be covered and the sequencing of the activities so that there are breaks and periods where people can actually pause to reflect on what they are assimilating. Selection and design of the training media, whether it's supposed to be done face-to-face, online, combination of the two, and so on and so forth. Selection of development of experiential exercises. And you all know that sometimes when a training program is one way and more theoretical, it becomes very much difficult for trainees to actually practice what they are learning. So there might be the need for you to intersperse the delivery methods with case studies, role plays, and so on and so forth, so that people get immediate feedback and also experience of what is expected of them. Then the timing and planning of each activity so that it does not feed into the weekends, and it does not also affect the work-life balance pursuits of the trainees. Then the selection of the methods of instruction to be used, whether it has to be on the job, off the job, if it is even off the job, is it lectures, is it online conferences, and so on and so forth. The number and type of evaluation items to be used. So how are you even going to evaluate the success or failure of the training program? And at what point? Is it the summative approach, or it is the formative approach, or a combination of the two, and so on and so forth. So this is a typical example of a lesson plan for experiential team building. And if you take a sober look at this lesson plan, they have actually scheduled it on 2 main days, Friday night and Saturday. And you realize that at one point in time during the Friday night, they will be having dinner, and from 7:30 to 9, they have some series of activities to perform over here. And right after the activities, a discussion of the plan for the weekend and some other goals are for the retreat are discussed, so that as you go home and you prepare for the next day activities, you will still be incubating it in your mind. Now, once they come for Saturday, there's, in terms of the scheduling, there is a portion for breakfast, then the portion for brainstorming, then a discussion will follow. Right after that, there will be some break for them to get some fresh air, and then the experiential activity will be conducted. So this could be a typical example that you can take a look at your own time. Now, after scheduling, it is also important for you to select the training methods and media. Whereas there are multiplicity of training methods and media, for the purpose of this lecture, I'm going to use the one I have currently on my screen to illustrate, but there are numerous ones beyond this. So in terms of the methods that you can employ to deliver your training program, or that you can consider in your designing of the training program, depending on the nature of what you want to achieve, you can use an instructor-led live program, which means that you'll be perhaps meeting the trainees face-to-face, either on the job or off the job. And research indicates that most HRD professionals, about 60.1%, prefer to use instructor-led programs. So over there, the trainer interacts and intercommunicates with the trainees live. Then you can also have instructor-led online programs. And this is the situation where, due to supervening events or events beyond the control of the trainer and the trainees, they decide to embark on the training exercise via online, like we are currently doing today. And research indicates that it constitutes 6.46%. Then you can have instructor-led remote programs. Instructor-led remote programs. And this is where the instructor who will be administering the training intervention will be doing it from a remote location. Now, which means that whereas the trainees are at one place, the trainer too is at another location and will be administering it. Then you can have the self-paced online one. And this is the situation where the program materials and the video or program information and everything is pre-recorded or pre-administered online, so that the trainees at their own convenient time will be making good use of it, will be learning, but through online. Then you can have self-paced, non-networked method. And this is where perhaps the program and its materials are pre-recorded, but it is not actually made use through the internet or online. So it could be pre-recorded on a CD-ROM, or maybe in a book, or it could be an, how do you call it? An audio of some sort. Then self-paced print. So the typical example could be a brochure or a pamphlet administered to the trainees. Then non-computer technology like audiovisual mobile devices and other methods which might not have been mentioned here. So still on the training methods and media, one way of classifying them is by the degree of activity expected or required of the trainees. In one end, the lecture method or videotapes are generally the least active form of training, in the sense that, in the strict sense of it, when a lecturer is before you, he just lectures, he speaks continuously, and you are expected to be at the receiving end. And so you might end up finding yourself in a situation where the trainees might have little room to be asking questions for clarifications and so on and so forth. Now, the same can be applied to videotapes. So for instance, this one that I'm pre-recording, you will have no opportunity to be asking me questions as you listen. It is only after when I meet you later on in the week that you get the opportunity to clarify some concerns that you are having. Now, at the other extreme, you can have the highly experiential methods such as outdoor training, role-playing exercise, case studies, games, simulations, computer-based instructions, video conferencing, and so on and so forth. And research actually indicates that because these experiential methods gives trainees an opportunity to practice and also get feedback on whatever they are learning, it can be interspersed with the least active method. So for instance, we can intersperse the lecture method with role playing so that people, as I lecture, trainees or students will be given the opportunity to also demonstrate by acting out some of the things that they have learned. And based on the way they play that roles, they will be given feedback for them to know how they which areas they went wrong and how it can be corrected, not only from the lecturer but also from colleague trainees. Now, training approaches can also be grouped into two broad categories, which are on-the-job methods and off-the-job methods. And when we talk about on-the-job methods, they typically occur in the employee's work setting. Now, the off-the-job methods, which some also conceptualize as classroom methods, typically take place away from the workplace or the job, such as in a conference room, in a lecture hall, or in a hotel conference room, and so on and so forth. So this categorization is not definitive. However, because some training methods have multiple applications, it is important to take note of this. Now, computer-based training, for example, can be implemented using computer at the employee's desk or a workstation in a company classroom or even at the employee's home. So depending on how it's being designed, whether we want to do it online or a self-paced one, any of these mediums or methods can be used. And that is why we say these categorizations cannot be definitive. Now, how do you prepare the training material? In other words, the material that trainees will be going through and perusing to actually get useful information about the training program and what is expected of them. After training methods have been selected, the next logical step is to prepare or purchase the training materials, depending upon whether the program is purchased or designed by the organization. So ideally, if the training program is purchased from an outside vendor, then the materials such as books, handouts, videos, CDs will usually be part of the package. And some even provide after services like running training program for the one who purchased it. Now, programs which are designed in-house, however, will require the preparation of the materials also in-house. If the program is similar to the past training, those materials may simply need to be updated or modified to fit the current program. But if it is a new program, then the need for a lot of work to be done in order to prepare it from scratch. Now, there are several training materials that can be used to assist in the implementation of a training program. But for the purpose of this lecture, we will focus our discussion on program announcements, the syllabi or the syllabus that we'll be using, or the program outline, and training manuals as well as the textbooks. So program announcements. They are basically the information that the target audience the target audience okay, so they are basically the information that informs the target audience about the training program. It tries to educate them on the purpose of the program, when it will start, where it will take place, and how the employee can even qualify to partake in the program. It is admonished that sufficient lead time should be given to employees so that they can adjust their schedule and process necessary request forms. And the lead time over here refers to the time where the announcement will be communicated and the time when the training will actually commence. It will not be prudent or rational to send out an announcement for a training program which is geared or scheduled to commence tomorrow. You can't send it out today when you intend to commence it tomorrow. That the lead time will be too short. So you can send it way ahead of time. You can give yourself some months so that it will give the targeted audience an opportunity to actually prepare themselves and come for the training program. It will even give you, as the HRD interventions, the opportunity to do a good job by putting all the necessary preparatory measures in place. And it will also give room for a lot of people that are interested in the program to come forward and partake in it. So once you do it appropriately and it does not come along with a lot of inconveniences, then we are assured that desired outcomes can be achieved out of the program announcements. Now, the program outline, it basically enumerates in the documents which is communicated all the things that are expected to be achieved through the program. So typically it is provided at the beginning of the program, and these include things such as course objectives, topical areas or thematic areas to be covered, materials or tools that are needed, some requirements or prerequisites for each trainee, and a tentative schedule of the events. And this is important because it also helps the trainees to program or prepare in their mind's eye how the various proceedings will be ensuing, and they adjust accordingly. Then the training manuals or textbooks. Most trainers rely on training manuals or textbooks for basic instructional materials or readings and exercises or self-tests. Some documents are also organized into modules that make it easy to organize the training program into sessions. So when you say you are using the modular system, it means that you will put some of the thematic areas under one module, then you deliver it. Then in another module, the remaining thematic areas will be covered, and so on and so forth. So textbooks provide a broad treatment of subject matter, whereas training manuals are better known for their brevity and hands-on approach. When we say brevity, it means that they go into rich details, all the details, the nitty-gritties of the training proceedings. Now, scheduling an HRD program. So the task of scheduling a training program may seem relatively straightforward when compared to other decisions that are made by the trainer. But it is definitely not the case, because in terms of scheduling, you are now supposed to create an environment where all other inconveniences or inadequacies can be addressed in terms of the time where you will start it, the various breaks that are supposed to be ensued in the program, and the various other activities and how they are supposed to be interspersed with the various training activities. Okay, so we are talking about the experiential activities and the training or the lecture activities. All these things have to be properly organized within the training environment, and it falls under the purview of scheduling of an HRD program. So the task of scheduling a training or HRD program, organizations can be busy, hectic, and found in unpredictable environments. And this may make the scheduling of an HRD intervention very difficult. Ideally, the goal of scheduling an HRD intervention is to ensure that participants, that is both the trainer and the trainees, are available and have their attention focused on the learning that will be on learning tasks that will be administered. So it is important that in attempts to make the scheduling more realistic and accommodating, you have to take into consideration the scheduling during working hours and also scheduling after work hours. One popular option for program scheduling is running the program during normal working hours. And at this point in time, you realize that the employees are all available at their work premises. So they might have no excuse of saying, I'm going here or there. But the challenge is that they might also have their attention fixated on their specific responsibilities that they've been assigned to. So which presupposes that the scheduling during working hours has to be done in such a way that it does not interfere with their normal working hours, which means there must be an excuse for them to go for the training program during a stipulated point in time. So when scheduling a program during the normal working hours, the HRD professional should consider factors such as day of the week that they want the program to occur, time of the day, peak work hours, staff meeting times, travel requirements, and so on and so forth. And by considering all these things, it is expected that by the end of the program, that trainees will have no challenges to address it. Then also scheduling after work hours. When we talk about scheduling after work hours, we are basically referring to the degree to which the training program will occur or ensue during a time where trainees are not at the workplace. So that is what basically we are trying to do. And at the back of the HRD professional's mind, he must schedule, when they are doing the scheduling after work hours, they must done it in such a way that it does not interfere or it does not inconvenience the trainees as far as their work-life balance pursuits are concerned. So this will be all for today's lecture, and I hope that you watch the video and use it to augment what I have shared on the Moodle platform as far as the slides is concerned. So I have given you the slides and I've also provided you with these explanatory videos. So please make good use of it. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.